Russia's Ministry of Finance is preparing to switch to emergency mode one more time by raising value-added tax by 1/10 of the current rate, by 10%, by 2 points. Fuel shortages are growing. Oil revenues have shrunk by a quarter this past month. The officials are in panic, and Vladimir Putin is very angry with them, and he lets them know that. The countdown to Russia's economic Armageddon has begun. Stick around if you want numbers, figures, and events, because I have plenty of those coming up. And I have a treat for you today. I have one sensational news at the very end of this live stream. It concerns all Russians and will make their lives, well, it might even end lives of the many. Howdy, everyone. My name is Konstantin. Welcome to Inside Russia, the YouTube channel where usual Russia is explained by the unusual Russian. Welcome to weekly economic update. This is week 38 in review. The goal of this ongoing series is to document Russia's economic transformation in real time. Weekly consistent coverage gives a truer picture than isolated headlines. Every Wednesday, I track down the same core dashboard: rates, budget, fuel, revenues, prices, trade, so you can see what actually changed, why it matters, and where the trend is pointing to. All my reports are built on verifiable public reporting, market data, and open sources. No hype, just facts and context. Now to the analysis. As usual, the economy can be analyzed at three main levels, each with its own focus and scope. They are the individual level, also called microeconomic agents. It studies individuals, households, and businesses. Then there is microeconomy, studies specific sectors or markets, and macroeconomy. It studies entire national economy. And this is how I structure my weekly economic updates here at Inside Russia, and I start with microeconomic agents. I basically start from the bottom and build my way up. Basically, it's about what impact changes in the economy have on lives of regular folks and individual companies. This week, I share some news of Russian mail service, and it's about how regular people in the city of Azov in the southern Russia have been transformed. So if you come by Azov, the city of 80,000 people in the southern Russia, about 40 miles from the capital, Rostov-on-Don, you will see a very strange picture. The retirees are not happy in Rostov. Now, there are 23,500 retirees living in Azov. 23,500. Many of them have families, children, and spouses. Many live alone. And in Russia, older folks have very hard time transforming, adopting to new digital ways. And one most important thing in their lives is their pension that government pays once a month. Now, most of the pensioners have switched to electronic pension, meaning they have a bank account and pension is transferred into their bank account. But many still prefer to go and take cash in their hands and put it in their pockets, because they don't like this electronic stuff. They don't like bank accounts. They don't like ATM cards. They don't understand. They are afraid of that, and they just don't choose not to do it. My parents were the very same way until I actually explained them. I took them by their hands and took them to the bank, helped to open bank account, helped to teach how to use the debit card and so forth. Then they started using it. Before I explained, no way. So, a lot of older folks still go to, where do they go to get their cash? Post office. That's the place that distributes pension every single day. Post offices have lists of people, and the retirees, and the retirees come, they present their ID, and they get their pension. Pension is from anywhere from 13,000 rubles, which is $150, to a few hundred dollars. Usually pensions are not that big. So if you come to the city of Azov these days, you will find a very strange picture. Unhappy retirees. There used to be quite a few post offices, post office, mail, Russian mail service offices in the city of Azov. And recently, they have closed down all except for two. The entire city of Azov right now has two post offices that serve retirees, give them pensions. That creates long lines. That creates people who just don't have time enough. They come late to get their pensions. A lot of them with limited mobility. A lot of them very old. They have hard time walking, and they're forced to walk back and forth from their homes. And it's become very inconvenient. Now, why is that so? Why all of a sudden all post offices closed except for two? Russian mail service is financed by the federal budget. And as you know, Russia is waging the war in Ukraine, and it's costing lots of money. Now, I've been talking of the economic tsunami that has been consuming Russia, and now we are seeing economic Armageddon. What does it mean? It means no money. Russia spends way too much, earns way too little, and there's a huge budget deficit. So, and then they're trying to cut the costs as much as they can. One of the costs is post offices. They fire people and they close down post offices. And that wreaks havoc in the lives of retirees who live in Azov. And it's not just Azov. There's another city, a large town near Rostov, not too far from Azov, and it's called Bataisk. The same thing is happening in Bataisk. I cannot give you the exact numbers of how many post offices left, but the process of closing down is currently going on, and people are unhappy. And I am absolutely sure that this process is taking place throughout Russia. Is it a big deal? Well, you know what? To a lot of people, it is a very big deal. It's making their lives so much more difficult. Russians say different things about that. But in my eyes, I'm seeing now that Russian people have started picking up the bill for Putin waging the war in Ukraine. And the first ones are the poorest people, the retirees. They are definitely feeling the heat. They are feeling the economic pain. Well, it's gonna get hell of a lot worse. Now, let's move to the markets, microeconomics. I'd like to tell you what's happening in a few markets, and I'd like to start with aviation industry. Now, a very odd thing happened. As you know, Russian aviation industry has been under strict sanctions from most of the Western countries, all Western countries, and from the sanctions from two major manufacturers of aircraft, Boeing and Airbus, American Boeing, European Airbus. Well, get this. On September 11th, 2025, the United States of America officially lifted sanctions that had been placed against the Belarus airline Belavia. Now the company's Boeing aircraft are no longer subject to restrictions imposed by the Bureau of Industry and Safety of the U.S. Department of Industry and Trade. The decision is accompanied by a number of conditions. For example, flight on Boeing planes to Russia, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, and Syria are prohibited. In addition, the transportation of goods subject to U.S. export regulations require separate approval, and this applies in particular to military or dual-use goods. At the same time, Boeing 676 remains under restrictions. The lifting of sanctions, this particular sanctions, makes it possible to service aircraft at authorized dealers and receive technical support from Boeing Corporation and the American aviation authorities. It also allows to procure spare parts. Why did this news make it to my weekly review? It's from Belarus, yeah? Yeah, right. Belarus is a part of Russia. Belarus forms one state. There is no border between Belarus and there is no trade limitations. Belarus government is controlled by Russia's KGB, and Belarusian president is just a puppet of Putin. Now, the Americans say that, we lift sanctions from Belarus. Might as well lifted sanctions from Russian aviation industry, because now spare parts will flow to Belarus in large quantities, and right after they land there, guess where they're gonna go? To Russia. There's not even border between two countries. The Americans, they should understand these things, but did they lift the sanctions deliberately to bail Russian aviation industry out? To provide Putin with spare parts, servicing aircraft? I don't get it. I just don't understand. I sometimes I feel like the world is spinning around my head. Well, there you have it. There you have it. Americans, why did you just do it? Can anyone explain me, please? You just bailed Russian aviation industry out. For what reason? So it can continue waging the war, can continue supporting the economy, it can continue paying lots of taxes. Why? All right. Let's move to oil and gas industry. Ooh, Russia is in trouble here. Russia's average daily seaborne crude oil exports fell by 934,000 barrels per day last week to 3.18 million barrels, or by 22%. 22.7, almost 23%. Almost a quarter. Huh? Can you imagine that? Russia's crude oil exports, seaborne crude oil exports, fell by 23%. Revenue from its sale also fell by the same amount, 22.7%, resulting in a loss of nearly $400 million this past week for Russia. The drop in volumes was the most significant since July 2024, according to vessel traffic data compiled by Bloomberg. It was the result of Ukrainian drone strikes on oil infrastructure in the Baltic. Oil exports from the port of Ust-Luga, where drones attacked 3 pumping stations servicing the terminal, were half of the previous week's volume. Exports from Primorsk, where 2 tankers were damaged, were temporarily suspended altogether. Oil export combined in Russia dropped by 1 million barrels per day, with 3.2 million barrels shipped instead of 4.2 million barrels previous week. In August, Russia exported oil for $1 billion less than in July. In India alone, 400,000 barrels um, were shipped less. Things are bad because Russia relies on oil and natural gas export. Well, has relied in the past. As for the bread makers for the federal budget, Russian government, that's the deal. Russian government gets money from selling oil and gas mostly, then some metals, rare metals, and so forth. But it's the bread makers are oil and gas. And then it has a lot of money to spend on domestic issues, on everything, including on beefing up army, waging the wars, and things like that. So anyway, that has been changing. And now I want you to look at what Russia's Minister of Finance, Siluanov, said this past week. And it's actually unbelievable. He announced a reduction in the share of oil and gas revenues in the budget to 22%. Now, used to be 50%. Half of all money in Russia came from oil and gas. Now, right now, in September of 2025, 22%. The thing is, Russia doesn't have any other source of income, export revenues, to make up for the lost revenues from the fossil fuels. This is why I am like madman, keep on telling about economic tsunami, about Russian economy declining. These numbers right here, and it's not me saying, that's Siluanov. You know, he's preparing the population for a huge economic crash, the biggest one Russia has ever seen. That's Siluanov speaking, not me. Now, that's him. He kind of tries to downplay this number, saying, well, you know what, we'll make up the difference someplace else. Where? He doesn't say that. Because Russia cannot make up this money. This is Russia's financial death. The next industry is oil refining. Russia extracts oil and sends some of it to oil refineries to get gasoline, diesel fuel, heating oil, and the rest it exports crude oil. It exports, sends, ships to different countries. So anyway, drone strikes on oil refineries in Russia continue. And this past week has saw a great deal of strikes. And Rosneft's Novokuybышevsk refinery has suspended primary oil refining since September 20, following the attack by unmanned aerial vehicles. That's according to industry sources. On Saturday morning, Samara Region Governor Vyacheslav Fedorishev reported the drone attack. I quote, "This morning our region was attacked by drones. The targets were fuel and energy facilities. The aftermath of the strikes has now been contained." Well, I unquote. It's been contained, but the oil refinery is out of commission. According to the industry sources, it's September 20th. The AVT-11 primary oil refining unit with capacity of 18.9 thousand tons per day was shut down at the refinery due to the fire caused by that drone attack. Everything contained, right? It means the fire is put down, but what's next? Now, the second of two primary units at Novokuybышevsky oil refinery, AVT-9, with capacity of 4,700 tons per day, has also been shut down. Rosneft did not immediately, that's the owner of the refinery, Russia's largest oil company, it did not immediately provide comment to Reuters' request. Information about the attacks, inside of the attacks, is coming from Reuters. According to sources, the Novokuybышevsky oil refinery will be able to return to all units to operation by the end of September. Since the end of August, due to repairs, the processing of crude oil has been suspended at two other refineries of Rosneft Samara Group, Kuybyshev and Syzran. In 2024, Novokuybышevsk oil refinery processed 5.74 million tons of crude oil, produced 1.10 million of tons of gasoline, and 1.64 million tons of diesel fuel, and 1.27 million of tons of fuel oil. Now, all these millions, 8 plus per year, to me, these numbers are huge. Huge. They just don't mean lost tax revenues, lost wages. They mean less gasoline and diesel fuel at gas stations. They mean more of the chaos Russia is deepening into. The crisis deepens. Novokuybышevsky is not just one refinery that was hit last week. Kirishsky oil refinery near St. Petersburg, well, not too far from St. Petersburg, was also hit. That's one of Russia's largest oil refineries. About a quarter of capacity is offline, shut down. When it'll be back online, no one can tell at this point. The damages are too big. By the way, this news and many other news have been covered at Patreon account of Inside Russia. I select 9 news that I find significant on any day and make them available to patrons. And if you're interested in understanding Russia better, I suggest you give it a try. I usually put the links in the description to this video and in the pinned comment after I end the live stream. Now, the next market, the next industry I talk about, I always mention it, it's real estate. Would you like to hear something outrageous today? I know this. Like every Friday, I do a news report that sums up all significant news in Russia for a week, and I call it Crazy News Report. And this report on Wednesdays I call Economic Weekly Review. Might as well start calling it Crazy News Economic Review, whatever, because news here are crazy too. Now, how many of you out there are familiar, have experience of buying real estate? Like, let's say house. How many of you have bought houses, condos, apartments? I bet quite a few. Even once, okay? So you know the process. If you buy a new construction, you buy land and you go to a contractor, or contractor offers you land, and you sign a contract. And the contractor says, look, this is the house I'm going to build you, and I'm going to build you in this time. For example, in 6 months. So you come back in 6 months and the house will be yours. And if you don't get it in 6 months, there will be penalties for me. So I'll make sure I finish it in 6 months. And you come in 6 months' time, and then the house is ready. That's usually how it works. Well, in Russia, it used to work that way also, kinda. Now it's going to work differently. In Russia, developers now can postpone completion of the projects legally. Check this out. Russian authorities have allowed developers to postpone housing completion as anti-crisis measure. Deputy Prime Minister Marat Husnulin announced at the session of Technological Leadership in the Construction Industries Forum Summit. He announced that developers now are not bound by contracts. He said that he sees no serious risks in that. Now, of course, he doesn't, because there aren't any risks for him or for the government. It's just the risks for people who invested in real estate construction, new construction. And now they are going to be waiting for completion of their apartments much, much longer, and they won't be able to get any compensation for that because the government said it's okay for the developers. Sounds crazy, but you know what? That's first thing. When I heard the news, I said, I've got to double check that. I've got to fact check. And I did. And this is it again. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? This is crazy. Okay, so speaking about the current level of construction. Now, I'm going to give you some numbers I heard from the Deputy Prime Minister Husnulin. Again, it's not forecasting. I'm not talking about a catastrophe, economic tsunami. I'm not talking about Armageddon. Not me. I merely give you numbers that I heard from the Prime Minister Husnulin, and I just gave you the proof. That's the article. I quote, "Despite all our heroic efforts and record-breaking volumes of new housing, we are still only seeing about 30 square meters per person in Russia on average. Meanwhile, 19% of construction projects have already been delayed, and approximately 20% of developers are at risk of bankruptcy." Every fifth developer in Russia is at risk of bankruptcy. Now, do you understand why they are introducing this legal mechanism to legally prolong completion of the projects, to delay completion of the projects without penalties to developers? That's right. To minimize the amount of developers going into bankruptcy. Because if 20% are at the edge of bankruptcy already, imagine if they delay their construction projects. And 19% of all construction projects in Russia already delayed. I mean, this is crazy, okay? Then they're going down very fast. The Deputy Prime Minister estimates that the bankruptcy of the developers will exceed 30% of all developers if Russians do not invest in real estate soon. So now he says situation is even worse. Now it's 20, but soon if Russians don't start buying apartments at a fast rate, then the amount of bankruptcies will exceed 30% of all real estate developer. Every third real estate developer. No, not every third. Every 3 out of 10 would go under. Imagine how much money investors would lose. Investors are regular people. Imagine how much money subcontractors lose. Imagine catastrophe if 1/3 of the entire construction market in Russia just goes under. And it's happening. Again, it's not me saying I don't forecast any longer. I am merely telling you what Marat Husnulin, number one guy in charge of Russia's construction, he was placed there directly by Vladimir Putin personally. %19 of construction projects have already been delayed. Approximately 20% of developers are currently at risk of the bankruptcy, and 30% will go bankrupt if things don't get better. Now, whose fault is that? Obviously, Russian people, of course. They're always guilty. It's always their fault. Well, actually, you know what? I have to be here. There are always two reasons. If something bad happens, the first reason is the enemies of Russia. they are pushing Russia. They're placing the sanctions. They're making all these bad things for Russia. That are spies in Russia. There are so many people, foreign agents working for those in Russia, for those governments in Russia. The enemies. Enemies, they're by far number one source of all troubles. And if the enemies don't work, for example, how can you blame Americans for 19% of construction projects being delayed right now? What is Americans send spies to secretly infiltrate Russia and to break down construction equipment or something like that? No, you can't do that. It's not even close. And then the reason number two, it's people's fault. It's always people's fault. Who else? Who is it to blame? People not buying enough apartments. They're not buying fast enough. Okay? Therefore, the developers will go under. So it's people's fault. Meanwhile, I am waiting for the first piece of domino to fall. And that's going to be quite the sight. The first bankruptcy, big one, the biggest bust of Russia's market, I expect from the group of companies Samolyot. Now, if you follow my weekly reviews, economic reviews, you have heard that name. I speak of it a lot. Samolyot is Russia's largest real estate developer. Samolyot is in trouble. One of Putin's friends, Godnisanov, sold his share in November, and the rumors started going around that Samolyot has, is losing revenues and the debt's mounting. Now, 2 weeks ago, the major shareholder, the only major shareholder of Samolyot, 57-year-old billionaire, who was mad about his health freak, all of a sudden died because of his heart failed. Yeah, I know. What a coincidence, right? The guy who valued his health over anything in this life, and he was absolutely healthy, he had access to the best medicine. He was a dollar billionaire, by the way, that died of unexpected heart failure, right? And then a couple weeks later, Samolyot released its financial data for half one of 2025. Net profit fell by 61.9% to 1.84 billion rubles, roughly $20 million. Samolyot's consolidated debt is 704 billion rubles, or $8.4 billion. Do you understand what that means? I think if there are people who are in finance or in real estate, in banking, I think you already understood what this means. In very simple language, the company has shrinking net profits. It has gone down basically to nothing, because $20 million for Russia's largest real estate developer is basically zero. Okay, so this company has to service its $8.4 billion debt. $1 billion, not rubles. That costs a lot of money. As soon as the company goes into red, which will happen in the next, it released the data for the first quarter. It might happen. It might have happened already. We just don't know yet because there's no data. Or it might happen in the next quarter. But this is it. This is not even around the corner. We're standing at the moment where Samolyot will go down. And that's going to be the biggest bust of Russia's real estate market, the first, and it's going to start the chain reaction in the real estate market. So please keep tuning in, because I will be covering it. Samolyot's my favorite company. Oh boy. I'm waiting for the event. It's going to be quite the A company is standing at quite the financial abyss right next to it. Anyway, it's coming down with a big boom. Big bada boom. Car manufacturing. Another big bada boom. It's happening already. A new car tax on foreign cars called utilization fee. Утилизационный сбор. That's a brilliant idea. So this new tax will be imposed on buyers of new cars in Russia effective November 1st, 2025. So the 4 weeks left. This new tax was announced unexpectedly in the middle of summer, just a couple months ago, and no one knew anything about it. That's anyway. What is утилизационный сбор or utilization tax? It's a one-time recycling levy charged in Russia when a vehicle is imported or released into circulation in Russia. It's intended to fund end-of-life disposal. Now, the disposal of the car is a private business. It's up to a person or up to a special company called junkyard that actually benefits from disposing cars, right? Not in Russia. In Russia, the government, once you import the car, it takes money in form of this tax, one of the taxes, with intention to utilize your car when you stop using it. Well, it becomes like too old. I don't understand how this works, but I've never heard of Russian state utilizing the cars. I've never heard how this money is being used on purpose that it was collected for. I've tried. I didn't find anything. Perhaps there are large processing mills, flat factories that, you know, you get your old car there and then they take the car apart and recycle everything. No, nothing like that, but they take the tax. So now they are increasing the tax. It already exists, but it's small currently. But from November 1st, 2025, the government plans to change the calculation method for passenger cars. The fee will be factored in engine power, horsepowers or kilowatts. And before it was just age and engine size, but now they're switching it to engine power, horsepowers. That sharply raises the fee for higher power cars, especially for all 160 plus horsepower models, which is it's the most modern cars in the market. I mean, name me one foreign-made car that is less than 160 horsepowers. Probably there are few small ones, but that's just a minority. Everything is 160 plus horsepowers. Now, the fee is paid in addition to customs duty, of course, there's customs duty, and value-added tax, of course, there's value-added tax on the car itself. This measure the state is imposing will make, they say they will make disposing of the cars so much easier. I can't even say easier. Anyway, they're just stealing people's money because they're not going to dispose cars in any way. Okay, that's just a new tax. They are putting the state's deep, greasy hand deeper inside people's pockets to take more money out of there. What does it mean for car buyers? I'm going to give you a breakdown, very basic, simple breakdown. I'm going to take a car that you all know, Toyota Camry. Price for Toyota Camry in Moscow right now, and I'll remind you that Toyota does not sell cars directly. You know, Toyota has banned Russia. You cannot sell it from official dealer. There are none. So what Russians do, they fly to, let's say, Uzbekistan, Tashkent. They open a company. They buy a brand new Toyota at the dealer, and they ship it to Moscow. And then in Moscow, they resell it. It's called gray import. So Toyota Camry, price in Moscow, and after current utilization fee is paid, which is not much right now, current price, we see listings anywhere from 3.5 to 3.9 million rubles, which is dependent on trim, model, things like that. So modification, not model. It's around $53,000. So if you have 53 grand, you can buy a decent brand new Toyota Camry. Now, after November 1st, Camry, the very same Camry, that's about 207 horsepower, you will pay 1.8 million rubles or $21,000 on top of current price as the utilization fee. So previously, for this Toyota Camry that is sold right now, the utilization fee was just negligent, around $50. Okay, and the price jumps up by $20,500 starting November 1st. So estimated full price after this utilization fee, utilizaционный сбор kicks in, will be $74,000 for a brand new Toyota Camry. What do you think? Hell, let me know down in the comments. I think Russian state, Russian government, Putin's friends, Putin, everyone who is involved into this decision making, and Putin certainly knows of this measure. And I think that they have two goals in mind. First, to get more money, obviously. They need to fill the gap in the federal budget. I understand that. They try in every single way possible. And it was well forecasted by me 9 months ago. 2nd of January. Watch my video about forecasting for what's going to happen in 2025. So that's goal number one, to get more money through additional taxes. But there is another goal. I think they want to make car ownership a luxury, as it was in the USSR. And I remember well. I didn't know any family among my friends who had a car because no one could afford it. Our parents were earning the same kind of salaries, and my dad would have to work 5 or 6 years and save up every single kopeck without spending on anything to be able to afford a car. Okay, so you understand it was a luxury, and I think they like it that way. The current rulers of Russia, they don't want many Russians to own and drive cars because, cars, you get a car, you drive around, you have certain amount of freedom to move around, you get all these ideas. It's not necessary for regular people, Interesting, isn't it? Power utilities and deprivatization. Now, I forecast big troubles in the industry of power utilities in Russia in the upcoming winter. I believe there will be plenty of failures. I believe a lot of people will be left without electricity, hot water, heat, and sewage. And that's going to be pretty darn bad. Now, Russian state is taking steps now not to prevent that, but to change ownership of current utilities. Russian police arrested Urals businessman Alexei Bobrov in Moscow and transferred him into the city of Yekaterinburg for questioning. Russian media reported Tuesday, citing the enforcement sources inside the federal police. The Prosecutor General's office earlier this month filed a lawsuit seeking to seize companies tied to Bobrov and his longtime partner Artyom Bykov. Prosecutors accused their holding, called Corporation STS, of monopolizing electricity generation and supply, as well as household waste processing across the Urals region of Russia, according to the media reports. The lawsuit reportedly names around 80 companies and 14 individuals, including the current and former regional officials. Bobrov and Bykov, both of whom are said to hold Austrian citizenship, were accused of moving at least 20 billion rubles, or around 143 million rubles, 12 billion rubles, around $143 million, abroad through affiliated companies, which is not considered illegal in Russia. Now, utilities. I know how state takes care of utilities. Not well. I know how private owners take care of utilities very well, because it's their business, it's their money, it's their responsibility. The state holds no responsibility for people, and the private owners do. The state prosecutors will not knock on the door of the state, and they can knock on the door of private business owners. So business owners make sure that things are run well, maintained well, and so forth. So Russian state arresting these business people. The real crime of these two businessmen is that they have been able to create the business and become rich. They have been able to actually create product of generating electricity, of generating heat, of collecting and utilizing trash. That's their crime. That's their sin. It's not like they didn't pay any taxes. Yes, they did. It's not like they got money legally. No, everything came from their real business. Generating electricity, processing, disposing trash. It's just their business and wealth is up for grabs. And it's a very big piece of pie, very fat, juicy piece. So someone in the government all of a sudden wanted it. Hey, power generation and waste collection and disposable, great business. So someone in the government used the Prosecutor General's office to arrest, and they're going to imprison these people. There's no question in my mind. So they used it to arrest them, arrest the legal owners, and steal the company while they're locked up through a court's decision to change ownership. And courts do this all the time now. And this is what's happening. Not only I forecast problems because there's lack of maintenance, there's lack of spare parts for Siemens turbines, there's lack of people to actually maintain because a lot of them are on the front lines. The state steps in, and that's going to be a disaster. Well, the next news, if you're here for the first time, there's going to be news for you. Despite being pressured by the Russian state, followed by the secret police KGB, and demonetized by Google, and by the way, Google just came out of the closet and admitted that it has been banning, demonetizing creators for political pressure. It's time to take Google to court. So despite all of that, I am still here. Shaken, but not broken. I will go on. You have my promise. Thank you for your precious time, for support, for prayers, for love. Thank you for coffees you buy me at Buy Me Coffee, for PayPal, Patreon. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'll remind you that despite all the troubles in different industries, in all industries, there's one positive news. There is one industry that is doing fabulously in Russia. It is funeral industry, because they have so many customers this day, and customers keep on coming and coming and coming. Well, keep on being brought and brought and brought. There's one more industry I'd like to cover. That's logging industry. I have fresh insight, freshly baked from the oven of Russia. Now, someone came from the Urals region and told me a story. Now, as you know, Russia is rich with wood. So, what the state does, it leases land to companies, private owners, for either 50 or 100 years. And then what owner does is they start cutting down trees on that land in taiga in the east of Russia. And they use special machines, usually made in the West, in Germany, logging machines, very sophisticated pieces of equipment. They take a tree, they cut the tree, they clean it off its outer shell, they cut it in pieces, and then basically wood comes out. And it's a very profitable business. It's been thriving for two reasons. First, a lot of domestic, well, it was a lot of domestic use. Wood is used everywhere, in construction, in furniture manufacturing. And the second reason, Europe. Europe used to be a huge, big, very rich customer buying Russian wood. Wood industry, logging industry was in always a very profitable one. And what last 15 years was happening in the market was sizing up. I call it sizing up. Large companies were buying land from small owners, individual owners, and trying to bring their land portfolio up as much as they could. Because the more land they had, the more trees they could cut, the more profitable their business was. Okay, and that's a normal process in any market, sizing up. Okay, now that was until the war started. Now, I've said here many times that wood industry, pulp and paper industry are in big troubles. Well, this is the personal story of a person who owns a large company in Russia. He said that he's trying to sell as many pieces of land as possible to individual owners. So there's a very reverse process is going on. It used to be sizing down, now it's scaling. It was sizing up, scaling up. Now it's scaling down, because he's not selling any logs. First of all, he cannot cut them, because all Western companies, German, European companies who provided this incredibly sophisticated pieces of machines. I saw those machines, how they work at Hamburg in Germany. I was at Hamburg Fair once, and I saw there's a huge pavilion just for those machines. Incredible. One machine takes a tree, cuts it, holds it, cleans off branches, and then cuts in pieces, and then basically complete product comes out of it. There are no spare parts. Most of the machines at this guy's business are idling. He can't get them started, basically, okay? And those manufacturers in Europe do not sell. The Chinese do not produce machines like that, sophisticated like that. Their machines are just very primitive, very basic. They buy the machines from the West. That's number one. And number two, there's no domestic demand left. Furniture is not being made, and construction have stopped in Russia. So he estimates about 10% he sells for domestic markets from what he used to sell, let's say, 4 years ago. And Europe, under sanctions. To Europe, his logs do not go. So, full stop. Now, he's trying to scale his business down, and individual people, let's say a village, buys a little piece of land, and someone with very basic equipment, handsaw, and just handmade machines, someone cuts trees for domestic use of villagers. And that's not big business. So the big companies trying to get rid of the land as much as they can. The industry is in absolute ruins. Now, this is it for microeconomic report, and now macroeconomic indicators. The general health of Russian economy. So now I'll be very, very brief here. Macro stuff is easy this time. Russian Ministry of Finance just unveiled the plan to sharply increase value-added tax by 2 points, to be exact, by 1/10 of the current rate, from current 20% to 22%. It is absolutely incredible. This is the proof that people are in panic, because this is like nuclear weapon. Value-added tax, it does bring in more money. It does bring in more tax revenues. But you know what? It slows down the economy. It makes people poorer, because all of a sudden you pay more for everything. Value-added tax is included in everything. Every single product or service that is produced, originates in Russia, is a subject of value-added tax, except for rare occasions. So, I would like to tell you that this is the proof that Russian economy is in shambles, is demising. They cannot. There's a gap in Russian federal budget, and this year I estimate the gap to be around 7 trillion rubles. Right now, officially, it's almost 5, and then a couple months left, 3 months left, so it's going to be even more. Russia, the revenues from oil and gas are declining, and expenditures for war are increasing. Next year, there will be war budget, and we're expecting the budget to be, the draft budget will be released in a few days, in a week or so. But it's going to be bad, I promise you. Take my word for it. They cannot borrow any money to fill that gap. The only way what they can do now is to increase taxes, to somehow take more money from people and from companies. So, and value-added tax will bring them from 1 to 2 trillion rubles extra. But those 1 trillion or 2 trillion rubles, whatever it is, it's going to be taken from the pockets of Russian consumers, because they are the end payers of value-added tax. People will be eating less, will be spending less, will be buying less. They're spending more, but buying less for their money. And this is the proof that Russian economy is kaput. Value-added tax is not the only tax that they are introducing. They're going to increase corporate income tax. They just increased it by 5%, which is huge. January 1st, I think January 1st of 2026, they will increase by either 2, 3, or 5%. Vladimir Putin promised about 6 months ago that taxes will not be increased any longer. They will be stable for a very long time. Then just 6 months later, of course he lied, 6 months later, they're introducing new tax changes. Because they are stuck, they are pressed at the wall. They have no place to run, no space to maneuver, so to speak. That's the only way they can raise money. Now they're going to cut all subsidies, tax subsidies. There are companies who enjoy subsidized tax. They're going to eliminate that subsidized tax. That's going to save some money there. They're going to increase personal income tax. That's a lot of money. They're going to raise that. There's no information about that at this point, but I understand their intentions. They are planning on increasing that. They're going to cut state procurement things, products and services bought for the purpose of using by the state by a great deal. They're gonna save about $500 billion rubles there. They're gonna stop spending money on infrastructure, and they're trying to place infrastructure projects onto the shoulders of private investments. Building roads, HV lines, substations, utilities, things like that. Now it's going to be up to private investors. Good luck with that. It means nothing will be built in Russia any longer. Forget about even bigger problems for the construction industry. Layoffs, companies going under, because forget about the entire construction industry in Russia. It's dead. And then they have introduced the new tax on digital services. No one knows what it is, but most likely it's going to be a tax that would affect every purchase online, regardless what it is. If it's made in a digital form, then most likely it will be taxed. And the last thing, they're going to close down all so-called госпроекты, the state mega projects in ecology, education, healthcare, and so forth. A mega project is usually construction that the government announces and allocates so much money from a federal budget, and that money is used to, for example, to construct a road from Krasnodar to Sochi, big one in the mountains. That's a super project. Or to construct so many new educational facilities. To spend so much money on increasing quality of education, things like that. That's cancelled. None. That's done. And now, it shows that all these measures show that Russian government is desperate. They're using the weapon of last resort, tightening fiscal policy, which is going to backfire in the future, by the way. Higher taxes will increase to shrinking of the economy. Okay, higher taxes will increase to will lower taxes collected, because that's how it works. If you want to collect more taxes, lower taxes, and then people work more and pay more taxes. Okay, that's like a vicious circle. Basically, they've started the vicious circle. But I have one news at the very end of this report, and that is sensational. Now, I was going to call it another tax, but it's not really a tax. It's cost cutting. Cost cutting of the incredible. Well, judge for yourself. Now, every single Russian person is covered by mandatory state insurance, health insurance. Means health insurance in Russia is free. Not free. You if you work, you pay for your health insurance, but that's not much. You pay a few percent of your salary. Your company pays for you, but at the end it's deducted from your salary. Okay, and it's mandatory. But if you don't work, you're still covered. Everyone covered. From age 0 when you're born until you die, you covered. Now, the quality of service, medical services in Russia are to be desired, right? And it's been worsening, but still, there are hospitals, there are doctors, there are drugs. If you get sick, you go and somehow you find help. It's going to be much more difficult now since the doctors are gone and all these things, but you still get help. The mayor of Moscow just introduced this new absolute new measure to make unemployed Russians not having access to medical insurance. So, insured will be children, those adults who work, and the retirees. And perhaps the retirees that didn't work officially, they would not be insured. How about that? It's incredible. It's so evil. I don't even know what to say. I'm so nervous, and my nose started running. Friends, they want Russians not to have medical insurance. I think the next will be education. They will say, hey, free education for the kids of those who work. Those who don't work, I don't know, on their own. This news is sensational. Not too many Russians have heard of it. And I'm pretty sure when they do, they're not going to like it. The health insurance has been given, treated as given, because that's what we work for, all our lives. We pay special taxes. And now it's kaput. This measure was just proposed by the mayor of Moscow, but I think this proposal is going to materialize in a form of a law or amendment or new regulation. Now, while he was saying that, he gave out some numbers I'm going to share with you right now. And they're also nothing short of incredible. Now, for the past 3.5 years, Vladimir Putin's been bragging about Russian economy, how well it's been doing. Unemployment rate, 2%. Somehow, it's not bad. It's not good for economy. It's too few people. It slows down economic growth a great deal. It's a catastrophe for labor market, basically. 2% unemployment. Healthy unemployment from 5 to 7%. 2% way too low. But it turns out Vladimir Putin's been lying to us. The mayor of Moscow gave us, when he was introducing his initiative to strip Russians who don't work of insurance, health insurance, he gave different numbers. He said that right now, currently in Russia, there are 10 million unemployed, and the labor force is 85 million. Let's do the math. What is 10 million of 85 million? 12%. Real unemployment in Russia is 12%. And that's not a joke. And I believe it. This is where I am going to finish today's message. Thank you very much for watching. Carthago delenda est.